All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. I am awake and ready to talk about the Polaris Dawn Spacewalk that I'm sure many of you have seen the video. Luckily, it went very well, and I wanted to do a debrief. We should be getting Joe Tagmeyer on here soon to talk about it. But how many of you guys watched it live? I'm sure many of you know it was delayed by a few hours, so I did not watch it live. Please don't cancel me. But I did want to talk about it with you guys and go over it. And also some of the comments and sentiment that I've seen from the public, not really understanding why this is relevant, why this is actually a big deal. And so we have Chad checking in from Leander, Texas. And Joe is checking in. So is Gilberto. So hello, everyone. Check out this amazing footage. So this is a 3-hour video.
We're going to hear that chorus pretty frequently, where you do those kind of frequent, almost like check-ins. And I know you guys did something.
As we keep in mind, this was not something that just happened very quickly. This took several hours to accomplish. And so we have Jared checking in from Norway. Italicizer, I saw you in the chat last night. You stayed up to watch it. How tired are you right now? Hey, Ross, thanks for checking in. And so this is actually still playing. As you can see, the clock is ticking. So, it almost looks like a still frame, but let's see. Surgacy, thank you for the super chat. I have such a beautiful voice, but such a bad mic. Put this toward a new mic and a boom arm expenses. Let me know if you guys think the audio is bad. I have pretty much soundproofed this entire office, but perhaps maybe it's not the best. But yeah, a lot of you guys are tired. Keith says that he watched me live, which I basically came on late last night just to say, hey, I know this is slated for a live stream, but the spacewalk has been pushed back, so I'm not going to be live. But if you watched it, you're probably exhausted right now. So as we see here, we have Joe joining us. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Good morning, and actually good afternoon, I guess, here in Texas.
It is.
Yeah, I feel fine, actually. I feel really good.
What, did you sleep?
Yes. Yeah.
I did not.
I know you didn't. I know you didn't. But I woke up and it was like I was like, oh my gosh, I have to see how it's going. And some of the things that I've seen, and part of the reason I wanted to go live with you is to talk about, some of the misunderstanding, it seems, about why this is, I don't know, a big effing deal.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to pull up, well, let's talk about it first. So first of all, how was your reaction to it? What did you think when you were watching this live? And yeah.
Well, I think overall, the thing that stood out to me was sort of the professionalism of the whole thing. They had a lot of checklists. They had clearly had a lot of training, a lot of preparation for this. Everybody pretty much knew what they were supposed to be doing. They were taking it seriously. They were going right through each of the objectives. And making sure everything was working all along the way. Overall, I thought it was just an incredibly professional, almost like NASA-esque kind of mission that you would expect from a professional astronaut corps, which they clearly are based on all the training that they've been doing. And not just the crew, but also the SpaceX people that are running the mission and did all the support for it as well. And it could not have gone as well as it did had it not been for all of that preparation and the work that they've done. So overall, I was very pleased with how it went.
Well, I want to talk about a few things. First of all, if you look at the clock on the upper left-hand side of the screen, this is a video. This certainly looks like a still shot.
Right.
We just moved a little bit, but talk about like the process. I think some people were thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't wake up within the first 10 minutes, I'll miss it. This was a several hours long endeavor.
Right.
So talk about why we see them so still.
Yeah, well, it's actually more than just a several-hour thing. I mean, they started 2 days before with all the pressure breathing and bringing down the atmospheric pressure and changing the mix of the gases that they were breathing. So this is something that's been going on for a long time to get them to this point. And then from this point, they're taking it very carefully because there's a lot of firsts here. The Dragon capsule has never been this high before, so that's a big thing. They've never depressurized the entire capsule before. All 4 of the spacesuits and the connections and the systems that they have, although they went through a lot of training, this is the first time that they've ever been used in a depressurized vacuum of space kind of environment. What Jared's doing here is preparing to open the hatch. And there's a couple of things that you have to take into account. Is there's always going to be a pressure differential between residual pressure within the capsule and space. And the way that the design of the hatch is built is that the pressure inside the capsule is pushing the that hatch up and sealing it. So if there's any residual pressure within the cabin, then you need to kind of unseat that because it's pushing against that. Even if it's a little small amount of pressure, it's making it difficult. So what Jared's doing here is he's unlatched it, and now he's providing some force to break the seal and make sure that the hatch itself is able to work and completely open. The other thing just to keep in mind is that this was sort of the point of no return. Is once the hatch was fully open, if it didn't close, if they had problems, you kind of have the hatch open. So they want to make sure that everything is fine. The hatch is operating correctly, all the mechanicals, the seals. You'll note later on that Jared and also Sarah inspected the seals constantly to make sure that that was good because, that's obviously a critical failure part of the mission if they can't get the hatch closed. So they want to go slow. The other thing, and you, Ellie, have some personal experience with this, is when you're weightless, it's a lot more difficult to do things than if you're here in a 1G environment.
Right.
Like, for example, him reaching up to the hatch and maybe trying to turn it, you think, oh, he just turns it, right? Well, his whole body would spin. So they have to go very slow to make sure that he's properly balanced. You can see where his feet are braced at the bottom near the hatch, and he's ready to provide that force. Yeah.
It's like a bridge for your glutes. I mean, it's just wild watching this. People might think, what, is this on pause? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Talk about, have you figured out, because last night I didn't know the answer why, or this morning, why they delayed it by a few hours?
I don't know, but there's a lot of speculation that you could put into it. I think the primary thing may have been making sure that their path was clear of orbital debris. There's always meteoroid issues that they have to deal with, but I'm not suggesting anything other than the fact that recently there was a upper stage Chinese rocket that blew up, and it's in the same altitude regime. So I think maybe they wanted to make sure that it was clear of any of that kind of debris as well. So it could have been any number of that. Maybe there was some technical issues they were working behind the scenes. Maybe they were trying to get it to be at a different point in the orbit so that maybe there was better lighting. I don't know. It could have been a lot of that. They never actually specified.
I'm going to see if we can get to... Okay, here we go. Okay, so... Wow, crazy. I'm already seeing the comments. Well, where are the stars? Yeah. This is clearly fake.
Yeah, well, if you've had even a few minutes of camera work or experience at night trying to take a picture of the stars when you have a lot of light around you and the camera, it's very difficult. That's one of the reasons why if you really want to do really great stargazing, you want to get away from cities, you want to get away from houses, anything that has light, because that will overwhelm the camera lens and the sensor that's picking up the light. And, to us, it doesn't look super bright with Jared and the top of the Dragon capsule there, but to the camera, compared to the the background, that is like ultra bright. They've probably knocked down the f-stop quite a bit already to get to these particular images.
Right.
So, you know, if you want to see the stars, then everything would be completely washed out, blurry, and just a white blob. So
that mobility.
So what they're doing, and you know, you were talking about some people disappointed about what they saw, what was happening, is I think the best thing to do is go back to the mission objectives and what they are trying to achieve with this particular mission. And what Jared is doing is that they had a series of movements that they wanted to do and do them in a certain order to test the mobility within the suit. A couple of things is the suit itself inflates. It's like being inside a balloon. So every time it has pressure in it, it makes it much more difficult to move. That would be with your arms, your elbows, fingers, legs, everything. So they're testing to find out what their mobility is within the suit. And, you know, SpaceX was doing a pretty concerted effort to make sure that they had both the visuals and the audio at the same time, so that as Jared and then later Sarah did the same movements, and they would say, you know, they would move their arm like this, and then they would give a rating, and they'd say it was 3 or 4 or whatever. And that's communicating back to the team that built the suits that are collecting data to iterate to the next one. So they were trying to tell them amongst all of the various things that they were testing, how well the suit was working.
Well, I want to show this amazing piece of artwork, I think, but something that seems to be confusing people. So this is my friend Jade, who does, again, pretty nice artwork here, a moment in history, but this is certainly not what it looked like.
Well, I think that comes from two sources in the past, one of which is the comparison to the Gemini mission, which was done in the 60s in preparation for Apollo. And in that case, they did float free. They had a long umbilical, and it looks similar to this.
Right.
Also, the early drawings that SpaceX put out for the Polaris Dawn, when it was under the planning stages, showed something similar to this. So I think, you know, that kind of set the stage. And it wasn't until later on, as we were getting much closer to the actual launch, that they mentioned that they were going to have that Skywalker kind of cradle that they were testing on, that their feet would be mounted in a way so they can't float away, and that they weren't going to be out on a tether. So I think that's where part of that comes from.
Right. Well, and again, I mean, I think she does amazing artwork, but I think that some people were expecting a different sort of visual. And as Aaron says, I would call it more of a space stand than a spacewalk, but it was still pretty damn cool.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I can understand people would like to see them floating free, and you can call it a spacewalk, but I think everything in context and understanding the mission objectives is the most important thing. This mission was for them to test gate data. It wasn't to entertain us. And their objectives were to make sure it was safe, make sure that the suit worked, got data on the suit under various motions, and you know, they were going up and down the ladder to test how they could do that. And even when you interviewed Jared back in June, he was pretty specific that they weren't going to have tools. They weren't going to be maneuvering a lot of stuff. They were primarily testing the suit, and in a very rigorous way. And that's what we saw.
Oh my gosh. That's so, well, oops. There were some issues with the connection, it appears.
Yeah, well, that's because some people were thinking that they were completely trying to use the Starlink laser on this. I don't think that was the case. They were talking a lot about using TDRS, which is the the tracking and data relay satellite system, and ground stations. And as they were orbiting, in one case, they were right over the Pacific Ocean for a period of time. So there's not very many ground stations there.
Mm-hmm. And so
excuse me.
I heard a comment during the webcast saying, even though only 2 of them, Jared and Sarah, I believe, went out,
right,
all 4 of them did a spacewalk.
Right. Well, again, it depends on what you want to consider it as a spacewalk.
That's what the announcer said.
What's that?
That's what the announcer said. So
yeah, I think the more correct term would have been an EVA, extravehicular activity, and an IVA. In this case, all 4 of them were exposed to the vacuum of space, but only 2 of them exited the vehicle. So, you know, I guess it depends on how you want to be nuanced on that. But I would, it would be neat if all 4 of them were out floating, and it would have been a great visual, but I just would like to remind people again what the mission objectives were. And they have now collected data on 2 suits that were in a vacuum but not moving. So there's 1 set of data. And then they have another set of data of 2 suits that were moving out, going up out into the Skywalker system and doing a bunch of exercises. And now they have data to compare those 2 sets of suits. So, and I would also just remind everybody that this is the first step of many. And this is to develop not only spacesuits that can be further enhanced, having something called PLIS, personal life support systems, which would be the backpack and the battery and the things that you could go without having a tether. It's also develop the suits that could possibly be used later on, maybe on the moon or the Mars. And then the last thing, the major thing that I think people are underestimating is they're trying to disrupt how you build spacesuits. Right now, we have a handful of NASA astronauts that have billion-dollar programs to make suits, training, and all that. And that's great when you have a government paying for it and you just have a handful of astronauts. But if we're going to have thousands of commercial astronauts in suits working in a variety of different environments, there's no way they can afford that. So they've got to figure out a way of doing suits that can support that mission.
Right. Italicizer wants to know, are those suits designed to always be connected to an umbilical?
This particular version, version 1, yes. And you could probably see that the umbilical connected to their right thigh, and they had some of the controls on that thigh kind of switch where that umbilical comes in. I don't know if this plays a little bit longer, but where you see Jared kind of floating, you can see the umbilical going under his right arm down towards his leg. There you go. You can see where it connects onto his thigh. So all 4 of them were essentially that way. I think the 2 suits used for the actual departing the capsule were slightly different in that regard, but generally they were all the same. And this is only for this particular version of the suit. Back in June, when you interviewed Jarrett, talked a little bit about this suit. Was it going to be used again in the future? And he said, probably not. This one is just for data, and then the next one will be much different.
Wow. So cool. I like this comment from Jessica. My husband works at SpaceX and works 60 plus hours a week. Not fake, LOL.
Right. Absolutely. And by the way, Jessica, thank you and thank your husband for the work that you guys are doing. The team, when I say the team, the big team that makes something like this happen is just absolutely incredible. To put into context, the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo programs were government programs that was kind of a whole of our entire nation was working on this to make it happen. And here we have a company, SpaceX, doing the same thing, but on a completely different scale with much bigger goals. And it's just incredible what you guys have accomplished. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I think people need to realize that it's not just Elon at SpaceX. So I feel like people can't separate the fact that there are thousands of employees in multiple states. And, whether you like or dislike Elon, there are so many people behind the scenes of SpaceX. I just finished reading Reentry by Eric Berger. So good. Can't wait to share some of the, stories from it. Let's see if I can get to the point. Garen says, my favorite part was when they opened the hatch. I know seems stupid. I don't think that seems stupid at all.
No, that was a major mission milestone and a critical path, because as you saw, Jared was actually struggling a little bit with that. They eventually had to manually open it rather than do the automatic opening. And it may have been because of the kind of that lever that they used to unlatch it. Maybe it was slightly in the wrong place or whatever. But yeah, anything could happen. The seal could get damaged. It could jam or whatever. And if it is open, then that is a big issue for trying to have reentry. So this was a critical part of the mission.
Is it going to open pretty soon here? Do I need to speed it up?
You could probably speed it up a little bit. You'll eventually get to a point you'll see them actually moving the hatch, and then they'll cut away, and then they will. In the broadcast, they had him try it again, and then they transitioned to manual. And then I think it was they lost signal, and then they came back and it was open.
Oh, so you didn't You didn't see
I
it.
don't think you saw it actually in the moving. You saw him, if you go a little bit farther, you'll see him actually pull it down, but then it kind of pushes back up. And again, that's part of that residual pressure. Even though the pressure is virtually zero in the capsule compared to this vacuum of space, it still had pressure pushing that hatch up.
Well, man, this is part of the reason why I wanted to do the live stream. We even have negativity that was not a spacewalk, that was more like a space peak. And Bobby Biscuit saying, "Are you Freemasons or what? This was the fakest thing I've ever seen. Please give me your list of why this was fake."
I pity you, Bobby. I'm sorry that you are unable to understand what is going on. I really do. And I'm sorry for you.
Oh my God. It's kind of funny to hear you. Oh my God.
That's true. I mean, I think Bobby's just wanting to get a response, and you got one.
But he's not alone. Bobby's not alone. I've been reading, Facebook posts from different news channels, and people are being very negative about this. They're like, "Oh, it's not a big deal." Actually, where was that one comment? I saw you reply to it. It was on Eric Berger's.
Yes.
Yeah, let's see.
That reporter that was basically just dismissing the whole thing. I really don't have much to say to people like that. You need to open your eyes and understand what is going on in the real world.
Yeah. Well, but the problem is a lot of people think that this was completely faked. So how do we,
Well, I think Bobby's a fake poster. I think he's a robot. I don't believe him.
Here we go. So let me share this. I want this to be, real chat, guys. So it might get a little spicy, but so Joseph Trento said, "It is interesting, but considering we have been doing this for 6 decades, it seems overblown." And Eric says, "It would not surprise me to see this attitude from many," which is fine. But some perspective, when the Falcon 9 first launched in 2010, the same could be said. We've been launching into space forever, blah, blah. But here's the difference. 14 years later, SpaceX is launching 100+ times a year, something no government has ever done. One can imagine 14 years from now, dozens of people launching on Starship and taking a similar EVA in space, then on the moon and eventually Mars. That's why this is not overblown. This is potentially a critical step on humanity's expansion into the solar system.
I agree. And again, I pity people who want to believe something else. That's your right, but you're wrong. Yeah.
Let's read some more of these comments. And, I appreciate people's honesty. I'm
being honest too. I'm very sorry that in this day and age that you cannot recognize that people can do amazing things, and that is exactly what is going on. Yeah. Now, going back to the real world, you can see how Jared's moving that kind of lever, and as he turns it, he's unlatching, I think, 3 latches, and they kind of move away. Kind of similar to the latch system in a way that the couplers are for the International Space Station, although these are only 3. And I think what they figure out later on is as he's finished up with the crank, it doesn't quite go into the slot that it needs to go. And that was interfering to some degree with the automatic method of opening it. But what he has to do now, and again, like I said, is there's residual pressure within the capsule and it's pushing that hatch up. So he's got to break that seal or that bond. And so he's going to brace himself, and then he's going to pull it down. And you'll see the hatch here in a moment kind of flex inward. And you can also see, if you just pay attention around the edge of it, some of the hinge. In fact, on the upper right of the screen, you can kind of see that silver hinge point, and what it would eventually do is the hinge comes down and then the hatch kind of floats within it. And later on, when it's down, you'll be able to see that. But I think it took him a couple of seconds to be braced to be able to pull it down. So you might have to go a little bit farther forward.
Well, Jeremy gets it. Jeremy says the fact that all of them were technically in the vacuum of space is wild as all hell, especially from a private company. And I think that that's what's important to remember, is that this has never been done before by a private company.
Right. None of this has been done before for SpaceX. And, part of this is to gain that experience for future. And part of it is to understand more about how their space systems work. So that's why they're going kind of very generously, or they're doing it cautiously.
Right. Well,
Thank you, Geezer. I appreciate it. I always tell what is going on and the actual context of what's going on. So I appreciate that more than you know.
Jared says, I've watched it live with my wife, Anna. Cool to see our named siblings in space. That's pretty cool.
That is kind of cool.
Carlos says, boy, I think I would have let go regardless and floated out, asked for forgiveness, not permission. So I do want to talk about this, right? Because some people are like, oh my God, did they have to hold on for dear life? And what would happen if they let go? They do have an umbilical, and that's partially why they weren't able to really get out that far.
Right. They had the umbilical. They had the feet mounts as well. And there you go. You can see the hatch starting to move.
Yeah.
And you'll see as he pulls it down, it's trying to pop back up because there is just a little bit of pressure here. And he's trying to overcome that seal.
Wow.
Here, they're very limited to the amount of time and the oxygen that they had available. So they were very cognizant of doing all the tests, taking a look around and getting back in. So, it really wouldn't be something that you just want to let go and go.
Let's take a listen.
Copy, we see it.
Looking out that tiny window there in the forward hatch, knowing he is going to have a much bigger window in just minutes.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, he was struggling just a little bit on this particular go, and then they had to reset and then try it again, and then it was fine.
Gotcha. Let's read some of the other comments. We'll just keep this playing. Las Vegas SW wants to know, does the crew experience acceleration and deceleration in such a highly elliptical orbit?
Well, I guess if you're asking, do the astronauts relative to the spacecraft feel anything accelerating or whatever? And the answer is no, because they're all basically in an accelerated state falling around the Earth. The only time that they would feel some sort of acceleration differential between the craft and themselves would be if some of the thrusters are firing. So that it was basically the thrusters are imparting a force that is doing an acceleration onto the spacecraft, but the people inside, their momentum is going to continue. So relative to the spacecraft, they would feel some sort of acceleration, but otherwise, no, the entire system is basically falling around the Earth and it's in an accelerated state. So since they're all falling at the exact same rate, then there's no sensation of acceleration or of a force. And it's kind of the equivalence between an acceleration and gravity. And that's actually one of the basis of Einstein's theories.
Yeah, right. Let's see, there was
also Newtonian mechanics as well. So right now they kind of lost their signal, and then they'll come back, and I think the hatch will be open. And great success. You're right. The suits were, they're more stiff because you have a pressure differential between the inside of the suit and the outside. And they were trying to keep it at about, I think, 5.8 psi. But even at that amount, you can see that the suits are puffed up a little bit. You can see on the arms. And again, that's part of the test that they were trying to do. A larger part of the test is that they were experimenting with different pressures within the suit to find out what may be that sweet point between, being able to survive and have mobility.
Right.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, people aren't used to seeing this the side of you, Joe.
I just want to keep it real. I mean,
yeah, so do
believe what you want to believe, but don't bring it here. We're talking about reality.
Yeah.
So you can see how the hatch is now open. You can see that kind of frame that swung down, and then the hatch kind of pivots within that frame.
Yeah. Okay.
And now they're looking, at least both Sarah and Jared in the middle are looking directly up. And by the way, that's kind of an important point, is at this point they changed seats. So they put Kid and Anna on the outer seats, and they put Jared and Sarah on the inner seats. And then they changed their crew designation to EV1 for Jared, EV2 for Sarah, and then I think it was mission specialist, something like that, for Kid and for Anna, so they can identify who is what.
Well, and they only had, 2-hour window for the spacewalk?
2-hour window, and that began with the depressurization of the capsule and then ended when the capsule was repressurized. And they were actually using a pretty interesting technique for the repressurization. We can talk about that later, but it encapsulated that entire period. So the actual period of walking being outside of the capsule for the two combined was maybe about, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes max. I don't know. It went pretty quickly. But here, this is pretty cool. This is camera view, visor view from Jared, looking as you would be him crawling up
like
through
a GoPro.
The opening.
Like a GoPro.
Kinda, yeah. And of course, his view of the Earth.
Whoa.
By the way, I did talk to John Krause earlier today about the video quality, and they are locally recording all of it, and they're going to be releasing it later on, and it will be in 4K. So it's going to be just stunning.
Wow. Can't wait to see that. And talk about, because I almost wonder if, Kid and Anna are slightly a little bit jealous. Why couldn't all four of them go out?
I think probably a couple of things. Going back to the mission objectives and what they were trying to do with testing the suits, I think one of the things is that they want to have comparison between two suits that were relatively static and two suits that were in motion. I think they were also limited by the commodities that they had. So they only had so much oxygen that they could do. So I think they had to divvy it up. And, in this, the real time, it went so fast. So you can imagine trying to do two more people. It just would have been, difficult. So I think that they wanted to do that with the commodities, but also to reduce the amount of turnout and the complexity of that particular mission.
He kind of looks like he's like dancing a little bit. He's on a bowl, the one hand up rule.
Exactly. Well, that's part of the pressure of the suit. You can actually see how puffy his suit looks.
Yeah.
And that's just because even with 5.8 PSI, that's a lot between you and zero.
Yeah, right.
So right now he's going through a series of different kinds of maneuvers. And I don't know if you want to bring the audio on, but they were talking about, he was rating what it was like.
Operations dynamic and with disturbance are all adequate. Test matrix 1 complete. HUD check, 5.3 PSI, 48% RH, 33.9 Celsius.
SpaceX copies test matrix 1 and HUD readout.
I think that's good. They're testing pressure, relative humidity, and also temperature.
What?
They're testing, or he's reporting on the current situation with his pressure, relative humidity within the suit, and the temperature of the suit, which are all important for suit design.
Okay, let's hear. In a way, it almost looks like he's so unprotected. Just that suit is so simple,
Yes.
It's like, what? He's in space right now?
Exactly. We're used to seeing the big backpack and some other stuff, which he does not have.
Crazy.
But ultimately, that's pretty much it. You just have this thin layer over you. A pretty impressive helmet design. I mean, it swivels up and down clamshell wise, and it's still able to do the seal, which is pretty cool.
Well, Mitchell gets it. It's not a big deal. Are you kidding me? Let's see you go risk your life doing this. Oh, wait, you don't have the years of training to even be given the chance or the money
Yeah, it was always funny when I was flying and you have people that talk about flying that they've never done it. And I've had the chance to take them up into the air. It's amazing how little they actually know and what they respond like in a flying environment. Just a quick aside is I was taking a bunch of Army people somewhere, and we had a colonel that was kind of, all, hoorah and He-Man and all that stuff. Well, anyway, we were going into Japan, and I, because of where we were with the descent, I had to do a pretty aggressive descent, almost like a combat descent. And this Army colonel, that's, Mr. He-Man, hoorah, I can do anything, was screaming in his seats.
Wow.
but he knew everything before we flew, but while we were actually flying, it was a little different experience.
Well, not the same example at all, but like my first job when I was 15 was working at a trail riding place, teaching people how to ride horses.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was interesting. People would say, "Oh, I know how to ride a horse. Give me the baddest, fastest horse that you have." And then they get on the horse and they either tell it to go really fast and then don't know how to stop it, or they start to stop it and they keep pulling back on the horse and the horse is backing up and they're like, "Make it stop." And it's like, release the pressure on the reins. So it's like interesting when people claim that they're real tough.
Yeah, that's the difference between perceived knowledge and actual experience.
Yeah. Donald, I like this comment. Over the last 20 years, I've watched more than 100 hours of spacewalks on the ISS. The range of motion on these suits is amazing. My jaw dropped when I watched earlier. Holy crap.
Yeah, I agree. For version 1 and for what they were trying to achieve with this, it's absolutely amazing. I can only expect that the next versions are going to be even better. One of the things I always wonder about, you were, your point was these suits look so small, so thin, that's all that's protecting them, is I wonder if they can actually make them even smaller, almost not exactly, but almost like a scuba diving suit where you don't have to pressurize the entire body. Maybe you can only pressurize the part around your head or so, and maybe that would help them even more. But I'm sure that they've learned a ton already with this particular suit.
Well, and let's talk about not the fact that, this went so well, as we see here, huge test, 10 out of 10, but this was risky. This was dangerous.
Right.
This was not a guarantee that they'd even be completely safe. So let's talk about not only the suits, performing well with dexterity and mobility, but like kept them alive.
Exactly. Well, and one thing, and when you were interviewing Jarrett back in June, we talked about where he's at right now. The very first Russian spacewalk, they had a big problem. The suit overinflated and he couldn't get back into the capsule. So their only solution was that they had to depressurize the suit so he could fit within the hatch.
Oh my God.
I asked him about that, and that was something that they actually did do testing on it. Now, fortunately, the hatch here is much larger. They had a lot more space. But that could be one of the scenarios, is you physically can't get back in. Another thing that's really critical here is with a tether, it's very easy to catch it on something. So you can imagine if it snags and it breaks or something happens with the electronics. That's another advantage of having two people inside that are ready, if necessary, to provide assistance. In case somebody becomes immobilized. Micrometeorites and space debris is a big issue. One of the ways they mitigated that with this particular launch is that they reoriented the Dragon capsule so that the trunk was in the direction essentially where they would expect most of the micrometeorite damage to be. Also, they had it tilted in a way to try to minimize how much radiation, cosmic radiation, that they were getting just by shielding them for the short period of time.
Right.
So it's a lot more involved than just saying open the hatch and go out and do your thing.
Right. Well, and one thing you talk about, and I wanted to show this video again, of the idea of, okay, the tether could get stuck on something. Check out this video of us. Hold on. I got to mute it. In 0G, and look at how chaotic. I mean, people are, bashing into each other, and people have to be sort of like,
well, this is perfect. People were asking, why didn't all four of them go on a spacewalk? Can you imagine all four doing this in a combined cabin in those suits with tethers?
I mean, look,
it's just too much risk.
Chaos. And actually, these actually are lunar gravity. The first couple that look a little bit more tame, this is only lunar gravity. So as we get deeper into the video, we see like serious, people just like running into each other. I had so many butts in my face. Not that I did not want that.
Well, people, you're used to being here on Earth, and if I'm moving and I want to stop, it's pretty easy. But when you're in a low G or 0G environment, Newton's law comes. I mean, what's in motion tends to stay in motion, and it's very difficult to stop any type of motion. You know, one of the things, if you notice when they were doing their spacewalks and doing all their tests, is it looks odd to you because as they move, their body's moving in a way that wouldn't move that way here on Earth, and it looks, you know, it looks not completely real, I guess. It looks just so odd, and that's because it's so different to what we are experiencing right now. And
trust me, this was real. I can attest. I got
but I mean, in this, when you were doing this, and if you did something with your body, if you did it here on gravity, you knew what your body was going to do. But when you did it in here, it probably did it in a way that you weren't expecting.
I did like one somersault, and I was like, I'm sick. Like I've broken the seal of sickness. I'm done. I'm screwed. I shouldn't have done that somersault.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have gone upside down. That screwed me over.
Ironically, there is no upside down.
Well, you know. Jessica says, it was a beautiful moment. Sarah and Anna, inspiring little girls. Some just don't understand the complexity of the mission, only if they understood the engineering done behind the scenes. And Lou says, it was so disappointing to hear Tony from CBS Morning downplay this historic event. Sure, this was done before, but who doing it and why it's important now and for the future of space flight. So it is kind of, you know, people just don't understand. I found a video yesterday. It has like 1.2 million views, and it's, you know, the shitty things about Elon Musk. It's a very anti-Elon Musk video. And I was curious, so I started watching it. And these two women just totally are trying to take down SpaceX and say that SpaceX hasn't achieved anything and like they're not successful at all. And I honestly want to make a reaction video to it because it was so infuriating how wrong they were and how right they thought that they were. And it's like, you know, people just, they don't get it. They don't understand like the complexity. They don't know the historical context of just the space industry in general and how SpaceX really opened the door for, you know, commercial space, private space companies to be a thing. And it's frustrating to me for people to spread misinformation. And I understand if you're not a fan of Elon, but like, don't tie in SpaceX to that. Right.
I agree. Well, you know, I've already made my opinions of those people known, so I won't go into that. But I would say that, you know, actually getting experience in something, getting off of your computer and going out and experiencing the world, trying out something, maybe go for an airplane ride, have somebody, not just a commercial one, but go on a real one and do steep turns or stalls or whatever, and see what you think about the reality of life not within our gravity, how things are different, how difficult it is to do the things that they are doing. You know, and in a way, you know, when I was, one of the things is when I was flying and doing tankers, that's a KC-135, a refueling plane. The kind of the joke within our community is as long as we got to where we needed to go and gave the gas at the time that we needed to go, all of the other stuff that we did to make mountains move to get there and make the mission happen, nobody cared about. They didn't realize how hard it was. And we were kind of the victim of our own success because 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, we somehow made it work and we got there, we performed the mission. And people thought, well, that's just easy looking from the outside, you know. And it's the same thing with SpaceX, is they do all of this very complex stuff, whether it's engineering, operations, testing, they do all of this stuff and they do it in a way. And it's not just SpaceX. Look at Rocket Lab. They do it really well. Some of the other up and coming ones are doing it too. And people don't realize all of the work that goes on behind the scenes. You know, something that maybe people would know a little bit better is, what if I look at NFL teams and look at the players that are on the team and I went, they're just running down the field. How hard can it be? They don't realize that there's a lot of work behind the game to get them to that point. But if I bet you there's a lot of NFL fans that if I said, yeah, none of them are really special, all they do is just run around and catch a ball, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people really upset with me for saying that and not thinking that I understand what's going on. It's kind of like that with these programs. And the more successful you are, the more people don't realize how much work goes into it.
Well, I guess it's interesting. SpaceX makes it look easy. That's how any expert is, right?
Yeah. You were saying something earlier off camera about how people were disappointed in what they were seeing and all that. I call it the home run mentality. Is if you show up at the plate, use a sport analogy, and if you don't hit a home run, people are upset. You win the game, you do strategic singles and triples and get people in, and you do all of the nuances of the game and you win, but people are upset because you didn't hit the home run.
Right. Well, for some people, it'll never be enough. Now, I want to read, I'm super behind in the comments, so let me answer some questions quickly. So David wants to know, really curious if we will get an extended video and such on Netflix like we did with Inspiration 4. I happen to know the answer to this. Jared said that, yes, they are making a documentary. Yeah. However, they haven't identified which streaming service may land the documentary. Yeah. So let me see here. There's a lot of questions and comments.
Sorry that you got the more spicy me, but part of it is because I'm sleep deprived.
Well, but I think it's important. Like, I mean, if people are going to shit talk, then do it back. I don't know. I mean, it's like, I'm frustrated in seeing, sort of the FUD around SpaceX all of a sudden, and just negativity. And I understand that a lot of people are maybe not a fan of Elon, but they're thinking one man runs this company.
If we applied that logic to products, a lot of people would not be buying anything.
Right. Okay. Let me, some of these comments. We have a super chat. Thank you from MJ323. Oh, this is both real and highly impressive. Like easily 1,000 times bigger than opening the door of a 747 in flight at altitude. Thanks for the coverage. Thank you for watching. And I'm glad that you understand the magnitude of this moment.
Yeah.
And Bimmergeezer, thank you for the generous super chat. There is no better analysis and explanation of space than Ellie and Joe T. Thanks so much. Wow, that is pretty nice of you. We're just friends, kind of talking and shooting the shiza. But we're glad that you like it. And, I feel bad that I didn't live stream it, but on the contrary, SpaceX had how many people watching Monday night? I think like a combined, 2 million people or something on X and on their website. So I think it's better to do a debrief anyway.
The good thing is that the live stream, from the standpoint of the stream, was really good.
Yeah,
it was just, they lost signal coverage with ground stations and TDRS, but otherwise they didn't have any of the hiccups they had on the launch.
Right. Oh my gosh, that live stream was so jumpy. I want to know how they fixed that, because it was looking real bad there for a while. Okay, so Glenn wants to know, how much radiation are they getting? Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if you're asking as a whole, if you take the sum total of the 5 days and the various orbits they're going to be, or at certain parts of the orbits. I guess I can answer the second part first. Their initial orbit was about 1,200 kilometers by 200 kilometers. So that was, the initial setup. And that puts them at the apogee part, which is the highest part of the orbit, slightly within the lower band of the Van Allen radiation belts. And most of the radiation comes from, I think it's positrons at that particular area because of the ionization and the cosmic rays, but it's very, very low. When they went up to 1,400 kilometers, they went a little bit deeper into that lower band of the Van Allen radiation belt, but they only spent 6 orbits there. And in the orbit, the time that you're at the apogee is a fraction of the total orbital period. The orbital period is about 90 minutes, give or take, at that altitude. So it's probably about 20 minutes, 25 minutes in that higher altitude, each one. So overall, I think they probably got maybe a month and a half worth of radiation that you would get at the ISS during that portion of the flight. And then when they come back down and they got back to 700 kilometers for the the orbit. They're pretty much within the underneath the Van Allen radiation belt, so it's much less. So overall, it's probably like getting, I don't know, 15 X-rays, 20 X-rays worth of radiation. So, it's not horrible. It's a little bit, but one of the things that is sort of a question, I hope that answers your question. And then if you accumulate that over the time, it's like I said, about 15 or 20 big X-rays. And that would be more than like a dental X-ray. It'd be like a full body X-ray. But one of the questions when you interviewed Jarrett in June, we didn't get a chance to ask him, but I wanted to find out, and I haven't seen it anywhere, is among all of the tests that they're doing, were they testing any radiation shielding that might be used for later missions? And you can do that in a number of ways. You could put a lot of heavy stuff like lead or whatever, and that's really not ideal for launching because it's mass. But another way, and one of the ways that I think that they're thinking about using for longer term missions, is basically having your water supply around the outside of the ship, kind of in tanks, and the water itself provides a lot of radiation shielding. So I don't know if they were testing that or not, but it would be cool to find out.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a very thorough answer, and I think it definitely answers the question. Dworka wants to know, when are they coming back? I think it was supposed to be 5 days. So
approximately 5 days. That would put it about Sunday. Of course, weather is something they're going to have to watch and see. They might make it come back early. They might make it go a day, but they can't go much more than that just because of commodities.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they don't really have the luxury. They're not, have the resources of the ISS. So like you said, they can't really delay it too much.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, the good thing is that they front loaded most of their mission objectives. So they did a lot of their science experiments, some of which are continuing. They got the highest altitude orbit. They did the spacewalk now, or the EVA. And so the big parts of what they wanted to do are already completed. So that gives them some flexibility when they might come back.
Right. Robert says, and don't forget Sarah and Anna, SpaceX employee, SpaceX engineer, the observations she'll be bringing back will be priceless for both the suit and the SEAL hatch.
I think so, but there's also another part that's important, is that both Sarah and Anna are part of the SpaceX team that trains astronauts. So their personal experiences now are going to be better for their training. And also when they talk to future astronauts or astronauts in training, when they say something, it's like, well, my experience was this, it holds a lot more gravitas with the people they're training than somebody who just, again, has knowledge but not experience. So I think that's a big benefit to them personally and what they bring to SpaceX. And the even larger picture is, this is Joe Tegmeyer's speculation. I may be wrong, but the Polaris program is what is funding the mission for the Polaris Dawn, and that is separate from SpaceX. But I can see a time where they're working together to build the astronaut corps. And I think this is the very beginning of an astronaut corps or a training corps to bring on basically SpaceX employees that will be the cadre of people that will go on the starships to the moon and Mars.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Jared's a perfect person to sort of lead that charge. I'm trying to see if there's video for the
by the way, Spicy Joe here. Couple of points. I know that Jordan from Angry Astronaut talked about this before, and he used the term thrill seeker. And I've seen some people, or specifically Main Street media, whenever they put a headline on, it's like the billionaire or whatever, because they know that billionaire is a clickbait title, and it engenders certain emotional responses right now. Technically, it is true. Jared is a billionaire, but to say billionaire and thrill seeker really greatly diminishes what he brings to this mission and what his goal is for the future.
Yeah,
he is highly experienced. He is not a tourist. He is taking this extremely seriously. Yeah. He is acting as the actual mission commander. If you even follow any of what they're doing with their training or this mission, it's clear he's not just paying money for a window seat. So personally, I find it quite offensive when people use those terms because it greatly diminishes what he and the rest of the crew are doing. And they are all quite professional, and in every sense of the word, they are professional astronauts.
Yeah, I agree. He's he's just super kind and generous. He's not only changing the lives of the people that he's brought along on his self-funded missions, but he's raised a ton of money for St. Jude. I mean, how can anyone say that this guy is like just a regular run-of-the-mill billionaire? He's not.
I think if SpaceX were looking for the best ambassador for what they want to do with manned program, space program, crewed program, going to Mars, moon, whatever, they could not have found anybody better than Jared.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he's great. Thank you, Mick, for the super chat. Your commentary is intelligent and practical. You help us understand what we are seeing. Thanks. Appreciate that. And I actually recently got my hair done, and I was talking.
So did I.
Oh, nice. Oh my God. My hairdresser was like, hey, so like, is it true that those two astronauts are like stuck in space? And I went on, like a 20-minute explanation and kind of gave a pretty good overview. And then another hairdresser came over to me and she's like, hey, like, I really enjoyed listening to you explain that. Now I feel like I have a better, idea of what's going on. And like, you're really smart. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been in this niche where, I don't have like a background in this. And I now feel so much more comfortable talking about it and explaining it to people. And it was like a really feel good moment of like, hey, I do have a handle on this. I'm not as, I don't know, ill-informed or, whatever as I thought I was. I tend to underestimate myself. And it was really nice to be able to like help people understand the situation with Starliner. And yeah, it was a good moment. So I'm glad that you appreciate our commentary.
And I think the service you're doing, Ellie, is great. Is you're helping to educate a lot of people who certainly need education to understand what is going on with our space program, some of the good part of it, the bad part of it, whether it's government, NASA, commercial, whatever, right. But to understand where we're going and the importance of all this. And so I think you're doing a great service.
Well, and it sounds like some of you guys totally want to see me make a reaction video to that terrible video that I saw. I was so angry I had to like turn it off. So I will do that.
Yeah. I know that Tim Dodd for Everyday Astronaut is making, or has, I don't know if he's released it yet, but kind of a rebuttal about the flat earthers and the lunar landings were fake. And I know he's putting a ton of effort into it, but and I hope he's successful. I'm just not too sure if it will be, because the thing is what it's very ironic that I notice about a lot of these social media stuff, and when people throw out, BS kind of stuff, is that the effort that it takes for me to put a BS story out is minimal, and it requires no effort on my part whatsoever. And then it takes people who actually are knowledgeable a lot of effort to put together all the information to rebut it. And in the end of the day, the original people don't care.
Right.
So it's very frustrating in that stance.
Right. Well, Lou says this morning they had 4 million on the stream. Really amazing. That's way more than the launch. And another reason why I think it is important to sort of maybe I know that a lot of engineers and very academic people watch my channel, but not everyone has a background in this, just like me. And so I'm glad to see more of the public sort of tuning in. And that's why I want to help just explain it in an easy to understand way.
I agree. And I think the numbers are very encouraging to me that many people are interested.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question. Do you think the kind of jetpacks that were used during the early shuttle era have a future?
I think are you thinking about the one with like Bruce McCandless, where he was kind of floating on his own and he had the backpack and all that? That was very cool. They learned a lot. It was, and it's a very interesting technology. You'll note that they didn't really use it that much, and they started using more of the Canadarm to hold their feet, move them around, and tethers and handrails, and certainly that's what they use on the ISS. I don't know if the technology or the use case is there quite yet for them, but if there were, then I think a more modern version of it would definitely be something that would be entertained. The biggest issue is that with our current technology, everything is reaction. It's momentum devices, reaction jets. So you have commodities that run out. So you're very limited how long you can use those jetpacks and how far away you can go.
Yeah. I don't know what this comment means, but Bill hopes that I'm Ariana Grande, and I'm not. Some of these comments just make me laugh. Okay, Georges wants to know, why don't they just dock to the ISS? Well, isn't this not even like built or equipped to dock to the ISS?
It is impossible right now. That hatch that you see Jared kind of holding on right there, and we just saw him open it up and then crawl up and go up to the Skywalker, that completely replaced the docking mechanism. So it's physically impossible to do that. I suppose if we ignored the actual physics and mechanics of orbital mechanics and where they're located, the amount of fuel that they had, and we were to just imagine some situation that they could get close to the ISS and they had to get into the ISS, you could do maybe like, I don't know, Space 2001, Space Odyssey, where the guy blew himself into the hatch and then closed it. I don't know, but I think the risk would be so high that even in an emergency, it would be, no, they're not going to do it, because it would be risk to the astronauts here on the capsule, but it would be risk to the people on the ISS as well. So the long answer is it's both physically, orbital mechanic wise, and just realistically impossible.
Well, I want to talk about this comment from Woodchuck saying the first Russian spacewalk almost ended in disaster, almost could not get back inside. So let me find, I'm going to share.
That's the one where they overinflated.
Right. I want to share this tab and see if we can play this, and you can kind of explain to us. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong. Here we go. So this is video apparently from that spacewalk. How do you say it? Voskhod? Vos?
What?
How do you say Voskhod 2?
Oh, I think that sounds right. I don't remember the exact name, but this would have been in the early 60s. It's amazing how much our video technology has come along.
Yeah,
huh?
This is the nightmare.
Yeah, you can kind of see that the suit he's not able to get in.
Yeah, this was in March of 1965. At the age of 30, Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, how do you say it?
Might be Leonov, but
Leonov made the first spacewalk in history, beating out American rival Ed White on Gemini 4 by almost 3 months, floating outside his tiny Voskhod 2 capsule for 10 exhilarating minutes. Leonov felt, as he writes, like a seagull with its wings outstretched, soaring high above the earth. In keeping with the secrecy of the Soviet space program, few people, not even his family, knew about the spacewalk ahead of time. Even less well known was how close Leonov and his crewmate Pavel came to dying that day. Okay, so yeah.
They ended up having to depressurize the suit so they could fit.
And so for the people, because we're going to assume that not everyone understands the consequences of that. What are the consequences?
As far as depressurizing?
Yes.
Well, one, you need the pressure to breathe. So depending on how much you depressurize, if you have any problems with the valves, if you watch any space, you know that valves are always an issue. So there's always a risk that if you are depressurizing, you cannot stop it from depressurizing. There's also the risk of ripping the suit, trying to get into that hatch, and it snags on something. Also, you can tell that they have an umbilical cord, but that's about it. So the risk of floating away like he's doing on the right-hand side and having something go wrong with the umbilical, there's no lifeline. There's no way of getting him back. So there's plenty of risk, damage to the suit, loss of the umbilical, not being able to stop the depressurization. Also, depending on what they've done with pre-breathing and I don't know what they had done at that time, but if you depressurize too much, you could you lose your useful consciousness. And that's something that you learn in altitude chambers. If you get the pressure too low, you start getting confused, you get hypoxia. And the worst case is you could get the bends, depending again on how much of the denitrization that they had done prior to their spacewalk. But there's a lot.
Let me read you. So apparently there's this book, Two Sides of the Moon, Our Story of the Cold War Space Race, with some of his account of this terrifying experience. So let me just read you a short little excerpt from this. So as I pulled myself back toward the airlock, I heard Pasha talking to me. It's time to come back in. I realized I had been floating free in space for over 10 minutes. With some reluctance, I acknowledged that it was time to re-enter the spacecraft. Our orbit would soon take us away from the sun and into darkness. It was then I realized how deformed my stiff spacesuit had become owing to the lack of atmospheric pressure. My feet had pulled away from my boots and my fingers from the gloves attached to my sleeves, making it impossible to re-enter the airlock feet first. I had to find another way of getting back inside quickly, and the only way I could see to do this was pulling myself into the airlock gradually head first. Even to do this, I would carefully have to bleed off some of the high-pressure oxygen in my suit via a valve in its lining. I knew I might be risking oxygen starvation, but I had no choice. If I did not re-enter the craft within the next 40 minutes, my life support would be spent anyway. The only solution was to reduce the pressure in my suit by opening the pressure valve and letting out a little oxygen at a time as I tried to inch inside the airlock. At first, I thought of reporting what I planned to do to Mission Control, but I decided against it. I did not want to create nervousness on the ground, and anyway, I was the only one who could bring the situation under control. But I could feel my temperature rising dangerously high, with a rush of heat from my feet traveling up my legs and arms due to the immense physical exertion, all the maneuvering involved. It was taking far longer than it was supposed to. Even when I at last managed to pull myself entirely into the airlock, I had to perform another almost impossible maneuver. I had to curl my body around in order to close the airlock so Pasha could activate the mechanism to equalize the pressure between it and the spacecraft. So very interesting little, story there.
Yeah, well, another thing that he mentioned is very true, and people greatly underestimate that, is in a zero-G environment, because you don't have the assistance of friction and gravity and counterbalancing, it takes a lot more effort to do anything in general. And that's one of the reasons why the Polaris Dawn is testing all kinds of pre-breathing and timing and all that, is the amount of exertion that you can do, say on the moon, and what your useful time on the surface is going to be pretty limited because of that fact. So they're trying to figure out ways of minimizing how much pre-time before you go out to start doing your mission is possible. And that would be everything from pre-breathing times, the mixtures, and also the pressures of the suit, because they know that you're not going to get an 8 or 12 hour useful day on the surface doing things. And part of it is because you get very tired just because of the lack of the leverage, the friction, and the resistance that you have here in a gravity environment.
Well, and thank you to Simon for this super chat. Only a small donation, but really enjoyed this mission on my day off and still enjoying it following you. Yeah, we're trying to provide some different context. And Glenn wants to know, can you tell us about the nitrogen debreathing steps, how and why?
All right. Well, it's similar to scuba diving. And you might go, wait a minute, they're in the vacuum of space. What does that have to do with going down deep in water? And the answer is it's basically a differentiation or differential of pressure. And if they're in the capsule and it's pressurized like we are here on the Earth, that's kind of like the higher pressure. And when you go out into space, it's going into the lower pressure. That's similar to if you were deep into the ocean and then all of a sudden you surfaced. When you do that, if you don't pre-breathe a mixture of gradually reducing nitrogen, so it's more oxygen, and you get rid of the nitrogen in your body, what happens is when you go from that higher to a lower pressure environment, the nitrogen can actually precipitate out in gaseous form in your bloodstream and in your muscles in your body. And when that happens, it displaces all your cells and your tissues, and it makes it an excruciating effort, and it can actually be deadly. So what you do is, over a period of time, you pre-breathe a mixture that is either reducing in pressure over time, and that's what they did here with Polaris Dawn. Over about 2 days, they went from 14 psi like we have here down to, I think it was around 8-ish or so. And then they also started reducing the amount of nitrogen and putting more oxygen in. And then ultimately, they were in a oxygen breathing environment. And I had mentioned earlier in the video that was a unique way that they used to repressurize the capsule, and I'll get to that in a moment. But this particular suit, it did not have carbon scrubbers in it, carbon dioxide scrubbers inside the suit. So what it did is, as you breathe out, some of that gas would just exit the suit. And that's one of the reasons why they had a limited amount of time. So anyway, I hope I answered your question about getting rid of the nitrogen for not having the bends, basically, and what they do. Going to what they did with the repressurization is, after they got back in, they sealed the hatch and all that, they went through a period of time where they raised the pressure of the cabin by just putting nitrogen back into the cabin. And then by the breathing process with the oxygen in the suits, and it would exit out of the suit, then that was part of what they used to start bringing more of the oxygen into the cabin. And so that and the processes that they were doing over about a 50-minute period of time brought the cabin up to the right pressure, got the right mix of the gases. And one other thing that you don't think about, but you have to do in space, is because it's in a weightless environment, the gases don't naturally mix like we have here on Earth. We don't have wind, we don't have gravity, we don't have this mixing action. So they have to have fans around, and that kind of mixes the air for you to make sure that you get the proper mixture of oxygen and nitrogen and the quantities throughout the cabin for them to be able to take the suits off. Does that answer your question?
It was very, very involved and not very simple, people.
Well, when you interviewed Jared back in June, he talked about this as well, and he kind of compared it to, in sci-fi, you always see the people throw their suit on and run outside and everything is great, and he's like, that we can't do that. It takes a long time to do that pre-breathing and get your body and the equipment ready to go. And again, the longer you do that, the less time, your useful time, either in space or on the surface, because of that.
Right. Well, I think that covers a lot of the sort of events of this morning. I want to put together just a short little recap. We're about an hour and 12 minutes into the stream, so I think I'll end it here so I can put together kind of like a 10-minute rapid fire highlight reel. And so thank you everyone who watched. I hope that this is sufficient due to my absence this morning. But I hope that you guys really understand what a big deal this is, and how great Jared is, and how successful SpaceX is.
Yeah, well, I hope I was helpful. I hope it wasn't too spicy, but no,
we like spicy.
But I'll tell you what really is going on. I mean, if I don't know, I will say I don't know. But I'll try to give you the context and the information of what's really going on, and kind of, help answer maybe some questions. So I hope that was helpful, and hopefully people take what I say with the spirit of what I mean it, and that is to try to educate and make sure that we continue to embrace space, continue to develop and search for the future, and look for a brighter future for all of us.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jessica, for the super chat, knowing you're in the SpaceX family and you enjoyed the stream. We appreciate that. And Bill says you weren't spicy enough, so don't worry. You did not ruffle too many feathers, I don't think. Yeah, it would be interesting to have like a debate with, the moon landing deniers, the flat earthers, and maybe get someone like Chris Hadfield or something on.
You know, it's impossible that the Earth is flat. You know why? We have cats. They would have knocked everything off the Earth by now.
Cats, oh. It's a good one, actually. Yeah. They're probably sitting right outside of my door right now.
Probably.
Last night, I had the door open and Pinocchio like jumped up and I caught him like midair, and he's like 20 pounds. He's very heavy cat, very overweight. It's kind of funny. So locked him out. Awesome. Well, okay. Well, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for watching. You'll catch a highlight of this live stream in a bit here, and hope you guys are having a great Thursday, and we will see you. Actually, I'm going to see you tomorrow because Butch and Sunny will be talking to us from the ISS for the first time since July. So join us for that. Join me for that. And hope that you enjoyed this stream. So thanks so much. And we'll